didn't notice when you decided. There wasn't a clear moment, no inner voice saying, from now on, this is how it's gonna be. It was quieter than that, a small choice, almost invisible, made too fast to question, and repeated just enough times to become a pattern. Maybe it started on an ordinary night, the kind where everything feels a little too quiet. Your body was tired, but your mind wouldn't shut off. There was something there, a light discomfort, hard to name, but impossible to fully ignore. It wasn't sharp pain, more like a soft weight, sitting low in your chest, staying there. And then you did what you always do. You shifted away, not because you wanted to run, not because you were weak, but because, in that moment, moving away felt like the only way to keep going. You tried to ease it. That's all, and it worked. For a few seconds, maybe a few minutes, it worked. But what you didn't see is that something started forming inside you right then. A kind of internal path, a shortcut. So the next time that feeling showed up, you already knew what to do. And without realizing it, you started repeating it. At first, it was rare. Then it became automatic. And now, it happens before you even know what you're feeling. You feel and you react. No pause, no choice, no awareness. And the strangest part is, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels normal. It feels like you, but it's not. What you call your personality is often just a set of old decisions you never went back and questioned. And some of those decisions were made when you were just trying to survive, not live, survive. And those are not the same thing, because when you're in survival, you take anything that softens the moment. Even if it costs you later, even if it pulls you away from who you really are. You learn to adapt to what hurts. You learn to stay quiet when you should speak, to pull away when you should stay, to harden when everything in you just wanted to rest. And the most dangerous part, you get so good at it, you forget you learned it. From there, everything shifts, because what started as protection begins to feel like identity. You start saying, this is just how I am, but really, you're just repeating an old decision, one that might have made sense back then. But now, it doesn't. The body doesn't know that. It doesn't understand time. It only recognizes patterns. So when something even slightly similar shows up, it runs the same path, the same response, the same quiet escape, and you don't even notice. You just feel the result, that sense of being stuck, of repeating the same situations, of reacting the same way, even after telling yourself this time would be different. And the frustration builds, because logically, you know, you've thought about it, you've tried to change, but in the moment, it happens again. And it's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain, because it's not just about what happens outside, it's about what happens inside, without your permission. Like there's a part of you that decides before you do, a part that speeds things up, pushes you, pulls you into autopilot, and by the time you notice, it's already done. The reaction already happened. The choice was already made. The cycle already started again. And then that quiet question shows up, why do I keep doing this? But maybe the more honest question is, what is this trying to avoid? Because repetition isn't random. Patterns don't stay without a reason. There's always a function, even if it's hidden, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't want to admit it. Something in you is trying to protect you, and that changes everything. Because for a long time, you may have seen this pattern as a problem, a flaw, something broken in you. But what if it's not? What if the thing you're trying to get rid of is the same thing that kept you standing when you had no other option? What if this automatic reaction was built in a moment when you couldn't afford to feel, when there wasn't time, when there wasn't space, when your environment demanded speed or silence or strength? You didn't choose it because you wanted to. You chose it because you had to. That's not weakness. That's adaptation. That's your system doing the best it could with what it had. The problem is, it's still doing that now, even when you don't need it anymore. And that's where the conflict starts, because one part of you has grown, understands more now, wants something different. But another part is still running the old program, survival mode, and those two parts begin to clash. On one side, awareness; on the other, pattern; on one side, intention; on the other, impulse. And in the middle of all that, you, trying to understand how something so small became so hard to stop. But maybe the point isn't to stop it right away. Maybe it's to see it clearly, without judgment, without rushing to fix it. Because when you try to change something you don't fully understand yet, you end up reinforcing it. You fight the symptom and miss the root, and the root isn't the behavior, it's the decision, that small, invisible choice you made back then that's still being made now, just without you noticing. That's why it feels automatic, because in a way, it is, not because you can't change it, but because you haven't interrupted the right moment yet, the moment before the action, before the reaction, before the impulse takes over. There's a space there, small, fast, almost invisible, but it's there, and inside that space, everything starts to shift, not all at once, not magically, but in a way that's real, sustainable, because now you're not fighting yourself, you're starting to watch, and that changes everything. But before that really happens, there's something you need to see, something you may have been avoiding, because it's uncomfortable, because it touches old things, because it brings up feelings you learned to ignore, but they never went away, they just stayed there, waiting, and every now and then they leak out, as reactions, as tension, as silence, as excess, and you call that who I am. But it's not. It's emotional memory, still active. It's unresolved history shaping the present without asking. And until you see that clearly, the pattern stays. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it's trying to protect you from something that already happened, even if it's keeping you stuck now. And that's the hardest part to accept, that the thing limiting you today once saved you, and maybe there's still a quiet loyalty to it, a part of you that believes letting it go isn't safe, that changing is risky, that feeling might be too much. So you keep going, repeating, adjusting, compensating, trying to make it work the only way you learned how, even though deep down, something in you already knows this isn't it. And that feeling, knowing, and still not being able to act differently, that's what hurts the most, because it's not ignorance, it's not lack of effort, it's an internal mismatch between who you are now and who you once had to be. And until those two versions meet, the pattern keeps running, quietly, over and over again, and you keep living with that sense that you're always slightly behind yourself, like you're trying to catch something that's been inside you the whole time, hidden, protected, stored behind decisions you don't even remember making. And still, they're active, still shaping your choices, without asking, without making noise, but leaving marks. And little by little, it starts to weigh on you. Because it's not just about what you do, it's about what you don't do, what you avoid, what you feel and don't express, what you want but don't allow. And all of that builds a quiet tension, a sense that there's more, but something is in the way, and that something isn't outside. It never was. It's inside, running on autopilot, repeating old decisions, keeping you safe, and at the same time, stuck. And at some point, it starts to speed up, not in a way you can see. No one on the outside notices, but inside, there's a rush, a strange kind of urgency, like you need to decide fast, react fast, leave fast. It doesn't even matter what you're leaving, it just feels like you can't stay. And that's where the pattern gets stronger. Because there's no time to watch it, no time to feel it all the way through, no time to question it. You just act. You respond before you understand. You pull away before you check. You shut down before you really listen. And it all happens in seconds, sometimes less. It's almost like something inside you pulls an invisible trigger, and you follow it, without noticing, without choosing. And by the time you do notice, you're already in it. You've already said what you didn't mean to say, stayed quiet when you wanted to speak, pulled away when you wanted to stay. And then comes that moment after, that quiet, that uncomfortable pause, where awareness finally catches up. And you think again, Udo, but this time, it's not just frustration, it's exhaustion, a deep kind of tired from repeating something you already recognize, like you're stuck in a script you've already read, but can't stop performing. And somewhere inside, you know, there's a precise moment where it all begins, a specific point where the decision is made, but it's too fast, too subtle, almost invisible. It's the moment something touches you inside. It could be a sentence, a look, silence, absence, something small, but enough. And in that exact moment, something old gets activated. It's not about what's happening now, it's about what it reminds you of. Even if you're not aware of it, your body is, and it reacts. And here's the part that changes everything. Your body isn't reacting to the present. It's reacting to a past it believes is happening again. And when that kicks in, you go on autopilot. Logic fades, your awareness narrows, and there's only one priority: relief. Fast relief. Before the feeling grows, before it gets too big, before you have to actually feel it. And right there, that's where the decision happens. Every time. You may not see it, but it's there. Tiny, instant, but decisive. And that's what keeps the cycle alive, because every time you choose relief, you reinforce the path, you teach your system. This is how we stay safe, and it learns quickly, deeply. It doesn't forget, because to it, this is safety, even if, for you, it's become a limitation. And that's why change feels so hard, because you're not just changing behavior, you're challenging a system that believes this is necessary, that this is what protects you, that this is what holds you together. So any attempt to step out of it triggers resistance, internal, quiet, but strong. Sometimes it shows up as doubt. Is this even going to work? Sometimes it shows up as distraction. You start, and then you forget. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion, a strange heaviness, right when you're about to do something different. And sometimes the urge gets even stronger, like the pattern is saying, don't leave this, and you feel it. That pull, that pressure, that urge to go back to autopilot. And a lot of times you do. Not because you want to, but because it's faster, more familiar, safer in a strange way. And the cycle keeps going. But if you look closely, you'll start to notice it doesn't happen all the time. It shows up in specific moments, specific situations, with specific people. There are triggers, activation points, situations that carry more weight, that hit deeper, that switch things on faster. And those points aren't random. They have history, they have roots. They're connected to something you lived through, something that left a mark, something that was never fully processed, and it's still active, waiting for resolution. But since it was never really faced, it finds other ways to show up, more subtle, more disguised, but constant. And that's where a different question starts to form, not why do I do this, but when did this start? And that question changes everything, because it pulls you out of judgment and into curiosity. It creates space, distance. It lets you start seeing the pattern as something that had a beginning, and anything that has a beginning can be understood, revisited, reframed. But that asks for something you may have been avoiding, looking back, not to relive it, but to understand it, to recognize the moment when that decision made sense, and slowly to realize you're not there anymore. The context changed, you changed, but the response didn't. And that's what needs to be updated, not removed, updated, because it was built on a reality that no longer exists, but it's still being used, like nothing ever changed. And that creates distortion. You're responding to the present with tools from the past, and the result never quite fits. Something always feels off, something extra, or something missing. There's always a quiet discomfort, and that discomfort is the signal, a sign that something in you is operating out of time, out of context, still active. And the more you try to ignore it, the louder it shows up in different ways, different situations, but with the same core. And this is where something starts to reveal itself, not fully, but enough for you to feel it. There's a presence there, a part of you. Not fully conscious, but not random either. It has logic, a pattern, an intention. Even if it's distorted, even if it's outdated, it's trying to do something, protect something, avoid something. And little by little, you start to see this isn't just a habit, it's not just behavior, it's deeper than that, more structured, older, and more intelligent than it looks, because it wasn't created by accident. It was built in response to something real, something that demanded a quick decision, an adaptation, a choice. And that choice became a pattern. The pattern became identity, and the identity became truth. But now that truth is starting to crack, because you're seeing it. Maybe not all the way yet, maybe with some doubt, but it's not invisible anymore. And once something is no longer invisible, it starts to lose its grip, even before you know exactly what to do with it. And maybe you don't know yet. Maybe it still feels confusing. Maybe you're still trying to understand what's actually happening inside you, but something has already started. You stepped out of autopilot, even if just for a few moments. Even if just while you're listening to this, you stepped out. And that is the first real shift. It's not big, not dramatic, but it's essential, because everything that comes next depends on this, on your ability to see, to recognize, to not immediately run, to stay a few seconds longer inside the feeling, without rushing to fix it, without reaching for distraction, without falling back into the pattern. And that's where something new begins to form, a new possibility, still fragile, still unsteady, but real, and it grows. Every time you don't react right away, every time you hold for one more second, every time you notice before you act. But at the same time, something in you starts to get restless, because this space that didn't exist before is now opening, and it starts to reveal things that were hidden, things you've been avoiding, and that it can feel uncomfortable, because what begins to surface isn't just the behavior, it's what's underneath it, the original emotion, the memory tied to it, the feeling you couldn't afford to feel back then. And that's now finding its way back, not with the same intensity, but with the same core. And at this point, most people go back to autopilot, back to the pattern, back to quick relief, because it's easier, more familiar. It avoids that direct contact with something deeper. But if you stay, if you hold, if you don't run, something starts to take shape. Something becomes clearer. Something begins to have a name, and that name changes everything, because when it was just a vague feeling, there was nothing you could do with it. But now it's getting clearer, more defined, closer to being understood. And there's something you might need to hear right here. The shadow has a name. And once it has a name, it starts to lose its power, because what controls you isn't just what you feel, it's what you don't recognize, what you don't name, what you avoid looking at directly. But that's starting to shift now, slowly, maybe with resistance, but it's shifting. And what's showing up isn't an enemy. It's not a flaw. It's not something you need to eliminate. It's a part of you, a part that was built to protect you, but never got updated, never really heard, never fully understood. So it keeps acting the only way it knows how, the way that worked, the way that got you through. But now it's interfering, jumping ahead, making decisions for you. And that needs to be seen. Not to fight it, but to integrate it. And the first step is recognizing what's there, what the pattern is, what the response is, and what feeling comes right before it all begins. And more than anything, what's the intention behind it? What is this part actually trying to avoid? What does it believe will happen if you don't respond the old way? Because the answer to that is where the shadow starts to take shape, not fully, not all at once, but close, present, just beneath the surface, already whispering. And if you're still here, it's because this isn't just a story, it's about you. And when you start holding that space, something inevitable happens. You see it. Not in an abstract way, not like a nice idea that makes sense in theory, but directly, almost uncomfortably clear. You catch the pattern right as it begins. The feeling shows up, and right behind it, the impulse, that internal push, that urgency, that pull to react the way you always have. But this time, you see it, and that creates a different kind of tension, because now you can't say you didn't notice. You can't pretend it was automatic. You're right there, aware, watching yourself about to repeat it. And this is where a lot of people think they should be able to change everything. Like, seeing it should be enough, but it doesn't work like that. Seeing it doesn't break the pattern. It just takes you out of the illusion, and even that can hurt, because before you acted, then tried to understand. Now you understand while it's happening, and that exposes something you may have never seen this clearly before. You're split. There's a part of you that knows, that sees, that understands, and there's another part that keeps pulling, insisting, speeding things up, wanting to handle it the old way. And that second part isn't irrational. It has logic, memory, history. It was built in moments when you didn't have a choice, when reacting that way is what kept you safe, when fully feeling something wasn't an option. So you learned to cut it off, to reduce it, to move away from it, and that saved you. But now, it's limiting you, and this is the hardest shift to accept. The thing that protected you is the same thing keeping you from living freely now, because it wasn't built to expand you, it was built to keep you intact. But living asks for more than that. It asks for risk, presence, feeling, and that's exactly what this part tries to avoid, not because it wants to sabotage you, but because it truly believes feeling is dangerous, that if you open too much, something will happen. Something that already happened before, something that left a mark. And here, the shadow starts to come into focus. It's not about laziness, not about lack of discipline, not about being disorganized. Those are just effects. The root is different, quieter, deeper, older. The pattern running underneath all this has a name: emotional avoidance, the constant need to not fully enter the experience, to leave before it gets too intense, to react before it goes deeper, to control before you're exposed. And when you hear that, there might be resistance. A part of you might say, no, that's not it. I feel things, I think about things, but look closer. Feeling something is not the same as allowing yourself to feel it through. Thinking about it is not the same as staying in the experience without escaping. What this pattern does is keep you on the surface. It lets you touch the emotion, but not stay with it, because staying activates something deeper, something it's been avoiding for a long time. And that starts to explain a lot. Why you pull away when things get too intense, why you distract yourself when discomfort starts to rise, why you try to fix things quickly instead of understanding them, why you end up in cycles that look different but feel the same underneath, because it doesn't matter what the situation is. If the emotion starts to deepen, this part steps in and takes you out fast, efficient, almost invisible. And the strangest part, it doesn't feel wrong in the moment. It feels necessary, logical, protective, and in a way, it is just outdated. A form of protection that doesn't recognize you're not in that same place anymore, that you're not that same version of you, but it keeps running like nothing ever changed. And that's why this kind of change asks for more than willpower. It asks for confrontation, not aggressive, but honest, direct, without distraction, without escape. You have to look at this part and see what it's doing in real time. Feel the impulse without immediately following it. Notice the urgency without rushing to fix it. And that is uncomfortable because you're going against something that's been reinforced for years. It won't let go easily. It'll try to pull you back, turn up the intensity, create reasons, convince you you can deal with this later. And that right there is the core trap. The idea that you can put it off, that you can avoid it now and come back when it's easier, but that later never really comes, because the pattern only stays alive when you delay the contact, when you avoid feeling it fully, when you leave before going through it. And every time you do that, you reinforce the core belief underneath it. This is too much for you. And as long as that belief is active, any change will feel unstable, because deep down, a part of you still believes you can't handle the experience, that you need to leave, that you need relief, that you need control. And this is where it gets delicate, and also where everything can shift. You don't need to eliminate this part. You need to show it that things are different now, that you can stay, that you can feel without being overwhelmed by it, that you can go through it without running. But this doesn't happen through big moves, not through drastic decisions, not through grand promises. It happens in micro moments, seconds, in that small space before the reaction, where you notice and choose to stay a little longer, even with the discomfort, even with the urge to leave, even with the fear. And there's a simple truth here. The small step is what changes everything, because it's not about doing something extraordinary. It's about interrupting the automatic for a few seconds, not following the impulse right away, creating a new internal experience, one where you feel and stay. And the more you do that, something in you begins to shift, not visibly at first, but deeply, because you're updating the reference. You're showing your system this isn't like before. And little by little, the intensity softens, the impulse weakens, the urgency slows down, and that space, the one that barely existed before, starts to grow. But along with that, something else comes up: clarity. And that kind of clarity isn't comfortable, because it shows you something you can't ignore anymore. A lot of the patterns you're living today aren't about lack of ability. They're not about lack of knowledge. They're not about lack of effort. They're automatic choices built on old fear. And once you see that clearly, you can't go back to the same innocence. You can't pretend you don't know. You can't blame everything on the outside. You can't just say, "That's just how I am," because now you've seen it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that changes everything. Even if you still mess up, even if you still repeat it, even if you fall back into the pattern sometimes, the difference is now there's awareness, there's space, there's possibility. And that doesn't go away. Because from here on, you're not fully on autopilot anymore. You're in the middle of it. In the middle of the shift, in the middle of the tension, and most of all, in the middle of a choice that's now yours. And now, something different begins. It's not about understanding anymore, not about identifying, not about naming it. Now, it's about training, and that changes how you relate to everything you've seen so far, because understanding without practice turns into frustration. You see it, you recognize it, you might even feel something shift, but in real life, nothing changes, and that wears you down. It feels like you know exactly what to do, but you can't do it. But the point was never knowing. The point was always staying in that exact moment when the pattern tries to take over, holding a few seconds longer inside the experience. And that doesn't come from intensity. It comes from repetition, small movements, almost invisible, but consistent. And this is where the real process begins. Not a rigid method, not something mechanical, but an internal practice that happens in the middle of your life, while you're talking to someone, while you're replying to a message, while you notice a discomfort out of nowhere. It's there, always there, in the exact moment the feeling shows up and the impulse comes with it. And what you do is simple, but not easy. You notice, you feel it, and you don't leave right away. That's it. No fixing, no explaining, no trying to make it better. You just stay a little longer. Maybe 1 second, maybe 2. At first, it feels like nothing, like it doesn't change anything, but it does, because that second never existed before. Before, it was automatic. You felt it, you reacted. Now there's a gap, and that gap is where your freedom starts. And little by little, you start catching it earlier. Before the words, before the reaction, before the decision, you start noticing your body, your breath shifts, your chest tightens, your thoughts speed up, and right there, you know, this is it. And in that moment, you don't need to do anything big. You don't need to win against the whole pattern. You just need to not obey it right away. And that alone is already different from everything you've done before, because before, the impulse was law. Now, it's just a suggestion, a strong one, a persistent one, but not a command. And as you keep doing this, something starts to reorganize inside you, not in a visible way, but at the root. That old path starts to lose strength, not because you destroyed it, but because you stopped feeding it. And at the same time, a new path begins to form. A path where you feel and stay, where you notice and choose, where you don't have to run to stay okay. And that changes everything. But there's something important here. You won't get it right every time. There will be days when you notice and still react, moments when the impulse is stronger, faster, more convincing, and you'll slip back into autopilot. And this is one of the most important parts of the whole process. You don't turn that into guilt. You don't turn it into failure, because it wasn't weakness. You were trying to protect yourself, and remembering that keeps the process alive. Without it, you fall back into the same pattern, just with judgment on top, and judgment feeds the shadow. But when you notice, slip, and still keep going. You're building something new, something more solid, more real, more honest. And over time, those small moments begin to add up. Seconds turn into minutes. Moments of presence start showing up more often. And that urgency, the one that used to feel impossible to hold, starts to slow down. You don't eliminate the impulse, but it doesn't carry you anymore. And that creates a different feeling, a sense of space, of choice, of control. And little by little, you start responding differently, not because you forced it, but because now there's an option. There's enough awareness to choose another way. And that other way isn't perfect, but it's more honest, more aligned with who you are now. And that starts to affect everything, your relationships, your decisions, the way you show up, because you're no longer reacting from old fear. You're responding from what's actually here. And that changes the quality of your life, not in some dramatic way, but steadily, quietly, deeply. And there's a moment when this becomes very clear, a moment where something happens, something that used to pull you instantly, and you notice it, but you don't react. You feel it, you watch it, you stay, and you choose differently. And when that happens, even for a few seconds, something in you understands this is possible. And that experience matters more than any explanation, because it's not theory, it's in your body, recorded, real. And from there, the process gains momentum, not through logic, but through lived experience. That's how change holds, not through intensity, but through conscious repetition. And to make this real, here's a simple way to see it. A small moment, something ordinary, something that's probably happened to you. You send a message, they don't reply, and slowly something starts to rise. A slight tension, a discomfort, a quick thought. Something's off before you'd go with it. Start imagining, interpreting, pulling away inside, or reacting in some way. But now the movement is different. You notice the feeling, you recognize the impulse, and instead of following it, you stay. You just watch, you breathe, you don't act on it right away. And that small space changes the entire sequence, because you didn't feed the pattern, you didn't confirm the automatic story, you just stayed. And that staying, that's the practice. Simple, direct, repeated, and the more you do it, the more your system learns. We don't have to leave this. And slowly, what once felt unbearable becomes something you can move through. And that's where something completes. You didn't eliminate the shadow. You integrated it. You showed it that now you can hold what once felt like too much, and that changes your inner relationship, because the part that used to pull you starts to trust, starts to slow down, starts to give you space, and you start to take that space with presence, with choice, with awareness. And that is freedom, not the absence of discomfort, but the ability to stay without abandoning yourself. And when you reach that point, something reorganizes inside you, quietly, deeply, irreversibly. Because now, you're not trying to fix yourself, you're learning how to lead yourself, and that changes everything. If something in this touched you, don't let it pass like just another video. Write down what you noticed, what landed, what you recognized in yourself, because when you put it into words, you reinforce what just started to shift. And maybe this is the moment something in you decided not to run anymore.